My name is Olivia Morgan, and at 32, I've learned that family legacies aren't always what they seem. Growing up in a small coastal town, my childhood was filled with the scent of salt air and the constant roar of waves. My father, Daniel, was a commercial fisherman, tough but gentle, with calloused hands that could both mend nets and tuck me in at night. I was only 8 when the accident happened. Dad's boat capsized during a sudden storm, and just like that, our family was broken. Mom, Elena, fell apart in ways I couldn't understand at that age. The laughter disappeared from our house overlooking the harbor, replaced by hushed phone calls and the distinct clink of wine glasses late at night. Within 18 months, Mom had remarried. Robert Whitman was a real estate developer with slick business cards and even slicker hair. He moved us into his modern mansion on the hill, away from the sea and the memories. I hated it instantly, but what could I do? I was just a kid dragged along in the current of adult decisions. When my half-brother Lucas was born 2 years later, I watched Mom transform again. She doted on him in ways she never had with me. He's so much like Robert, she would coo, while I sat in the corner, wondering if anyone remembered I was half of someone else entirely. Despite the favoritism, Robert wasn't cruel to me. He funded my education, bought me birthday presents, and even taught me to drive. But there was always a distance, an unspoken understanding that I belonged to a different chapter of Mom's life, one she seemed eager to forget. By the time I turned 16, I'd grown accustomed to our family dynamics. Then came the argument that changed everything. I overheard Mom and Robert fighting about money. His business was struggling. Investments had failed. The mansion, the luxury cars, the private schools, it was all slipping away. "What about the trust fund?" Mom had demanded. "We could access that. That's for Lucas," Robert had snapped back. "And besides, we can't touch it until he's 21. I retreated to my room, confused. Nobody had ever mentioned a trust fund for me. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I skipped school and took a bus downtown to visit my father's old attorney, Mr. Peterson. The elderly lawyer was surprised to see me, but welcomed me into his cluttered office. "Olivia! My goodness, you look just like your father." His eyes crinkled with genuine warmth, something I hadn't experienced in years. "Mr. Peterson, did my father leave anything for me?" The question hung in the air as his smile faded. He studied me for a long moment before opening a filing cabinet. "Your father set up a trust for you, Olivia. It contains his life insurance payout and the deed to your childhood home. Your mother was supposed to tell you when you turned 16. He frowned. "Which was last month, wasn't it?" I felt like the floor had dropped from beneath me. Mom never said anything. "Mr. Peterson sighed. "The trust stipulates that you can access funds for education immediately. The house and remaining assets transfer to you at 25. I left his office in a daze, clutching a folder of documents. Our old house, the blue clapboard cottage by the harbor, had been sitting empty all these years. It hadn't been sold, as Mom had told me. It was mine. When I confronted her that evening, the truth spilled out like a capsized boat. Mom had been collecting rent on my house for years, funneling the money into Lucas's college fund, while telling me that we had to sell it to make ends meet after Dad died. "You were just a child," she defended herself, not quite meeting my eyes. "What would you have done with a house?" I made the practical decision. "You made the selfish decision," I corrected her, my voice surprisingly steady. "And you've been lying to me for 8 years. Robert, to his credit, looked genuinely shocked. "Elena, you told me Daniel's house was sold years ago." The look that passed between them told me this wasn't the first secret she'd kept. That night changed everything. I moved into the campus dorms early, using money from my newly discovered trust. I focused on my education with renewed purpose, understanding that knowledge was the one thing nobody could take from me. Mom called frequently at first, her messages alternating between tearful apologies and subtle accusations that I was tearing the family apart. By my senior year of college, I had limited contact with Mom and Robert. Lucas, now 13, was the only one I maintained a relationship with. He was a good kid, innocent in all this, and I made sure he knew my issues weren't with him. I graduated with honors in marine biology, a tribute to Dad that felt right in ways I couldn't articulate. With an excellent job offer from a conservation organization, I was finally standing on my own feet. Then came the call that would pull me back into the undertow of family drama. Olivia, Mom's voice was tight with tension. Robert's had a heart attack. We need you to come home. Home. After all these years, she still didn't understand that the mansion on the hill had never been my home. But I packed a bag anyway, not for her, but because somewhere under that roof was a half-brother who might need me now more than ever. I never expected what awaited me when I arrived a family secret that would make the trust fund deception seem like a minor ripple in the vast ocean of lies I'd been swimming in all along. The mansion looked exactly as I remembered: imposing white columns, manicured lawn, window shutters as black as a midnight sea. But the atmosphere inside had changed dramatically. Gone were the expensive vases and original artwork. The furniture seemed faded, the once gleaming marble floors dulled with time and neglect. Mom greeted me at the door, her once perfect hair now streaked with gray. She'd aged a decade in the 5 years since I'd seen her last. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, embracing me stiffly. The smell of her perfume, still the same after all these years, brought back a flood of memories I'd tried to suppress. Lucas bounded down the stairs, no longer the little boy I remembered, but a lanky teenager with Robert's jawline and my father's eyes, an unsettling combination I'd never noticed before. "Liv." He crushed me in a bear hug. Despite everything, the genuine affection in his embrace made my heart ache. We'd maintained our relationship through texts and occasional video calls, but seeing him in person highlighted how much I'd missed. "How's Robert?" I asked, setting down my bag in the entryway. Mom's face tightened. "Stable. They're keeping him for observation." Something in her tone made me pause. "But that's good news, right? Why do you look like that's bad?" Lucas and Mom exchanged a glance that sent alarm bells ringing through my head. "Maybe we should sit down," Mom suggested, leading us to the living room that now contained only half the furniture I remembered. The story they told over the next hour left me reeling. Robert's business had collapsed completely 3 years ago. The mansion was mortgaged to the hilt. Credit card debt had piled up as they tried to maintain appearances. Lucas's private school tuition had drained the last of their savings. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Pride. The same pride that had led Mom to hide my inheritance. "We thought Robert could turn things around," Mom said, her voice small. "He always had before. But now the bank is foreclosing," Lucas added, his teenage bravado cracking to reveal the scared kid underneath. "We have 30 days to vacate." I sat back, processing this information. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of, thought this was karma catching up to them. But looking at Lucas's face, I couldn't sustain that feeling. "What about the trust fund Robert set up for Lucas?" I asked. Mom's expression crumpled. "There isn't one. That was a fiction Robert created to make himself feel successful. He always intended to fund it, but the implications hit me like a wave. The argument I'd overheard years ago, the one that had led me to discover my own trust, had been about a non-existent fund. The irony was almost too much. "So what's your plan?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Mom took a deep breath. "Robert's medical bills are substantial, even with insurance. And with the foreclosure." She hesitated, then pushed forward. "I was hoping we could access your trust fund, just temporarily until we get back on our feet." And there it was. I'd been summoned home not because I was needed emotionally, but because my financial resources were. Lucas looked horrified. "Mom, we agreed we wouldn't ask her that right away." I studied my half-brother with new respect. At least someone in this house understood boundaries. "It's okay, Lucas," I said softly. "Mom's just being practical." I turned to her, my voice firm. "But the answer is no. That money is for my future, and the house is mine. But where will we go?" Mom's voice cracked. "We have nowhere, Olivia. No savings, no family to take us in." I stood up, needing to create physical distance. "You have options. You could rent something smaller. You could get a job, Mom. You haven't worked since you married Robert, but you're still relatively young." "A job?" She spoke the word as if I'd suggested she try flying to the moon. "What kind of job could I possibly get at my age?" "The kind that pays bills," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "The kind most people have." The conversation deteriorated from there. Old wounds reopened. Fresh accusations flew. By evening, I'd retreated to the guest room, texting my supervisor that I might need an extra day off. I fell into an uneasy sleep, only to be awakened by a soft knock around midnight. Lucas stood in the hallway, a plate of cookies in hand. "Peace offering," he said with a hesitant smile. I baked them myself. I invited him in, touched by the gesture. We sat on the edge of the bed, sharing cookies that were slightly burned on the bottom, evidence of his novice baking skills. "I'm sorry about Mom," he said finally. "She's been difficult since Dad's business failed. She's scared." I nodded, recognizing the maturity it took for him to acknowledge this. Fear makes people do desperate things, like lying about trust funds. His directness caught me off guard. "Yeah, the first overheard that part. I'm sorry she did that to you, Liv." We talked for hours, really talked in a way we never had before. Lucas shared his dreams of becoming a marine biologist like me, a revelation that both touched and concerned me, given his current circumstances. As he left to return to his room, he paused in the doorway. "There's something else you should know, Liv. Something Mom's not telling you about Dad's condition." "What do you mean?" His eyes darted down the hall, checking for Mom. "The doctors found something during his tests. That's why they're keeping him. It's not just the heart attack." "What did they find?" Dread pooled in my stomach. "Cancer. Advanced stage. They're saying months, not years." His voice broke. "And I don't think Mom can handle it." After he left, I lay awake until dawn, watching the ceiling fan circle endlessly overhead. By morning, I'd made a decision that would alter all our lives, one that Dad, with his belief in second chances and family loyalty, might have approved of. Or perhaps not. I would never know for sure. What I did know was that the tides of family fortune were about to shift again, and this time, I would be the one controlling the current. The hospital smelled like all hospitals, antiseptic, with undertones of cafeteria food and despair. I found Robert's room easily enough, guided by a nurse who seemed surprised that the patient had a visitor. "Your father's been quiet today," she informed me, misreading our relationship as she often had been mistaken for Robert's biological daughter. I didn't correct her. In many ways, Robert had been more of a father than I'd given him credit for. Not a replacement for Dad, but a presence nonetheless, one who had coached my soccer team, attended my high school graduation, and paid for university supplies my trust fund didn't cover. He looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, his once commanding presence reduced to a network of the fourth lines and monitoring equipment. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Olivia?" he rasped, reaching for the water cup beside his bed. I handed it to him, watching as he took small, measured sips. "I didn't think you'd come." "Lucas called me," I said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "He told me everything." Robert closed his eyes briefly. "Everything? The bankruptcy, the foreclosure, the cancer?" I met his gaze directly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He attempted a shrug that ended in a grimace of pain, pride, shame. "Pick your poison." He set the cup down with a shaky hand. "Besides, we haven't exactly been close since you learned about the trust fund. That was Mom's doing, not yours," I said quietly. I didn't stop her. His admission hung between us. "I knew what she was doing with the rental income from your house." I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. We sat in silence for a moment, the beeping of his heart monitor marking time. "Lucas wants to be a marine biologist," I finally said. "Did you know that?" A ghost of a smile touched Robert's lips, like his big sister and his honorary grandfather. At my surprised look, he added, "Your dad and I weren't always at odds, you know." Before I met Elena, Daniel helped me secure investors for my first development project. He was a good man. This was news to me. In my childhood memories, the two men existed in completely separate spheres, Dad in the warm glow of nostalgia, Robert in the cold reality of present day. "Why didn't Mom ever tell me you knew Dad?" Robert's laugh turned into a cough. "Your mother has a talent for selective storytelling. She compartmentalizes her life before Daniel, after Daniel, with me. You are a walking reminder of her past. I think that's why she favored Lucas," I finished when he trailed off. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. It wasn't right. I tried to compensate, in my way. We talked for another hour, really talked. without the evasions and half-truths that had characterized our relationship for years. He told me about his diagnosis stage, 4 pancreatic cancer, spread to the liver, about the business failures, risky investments, economic downturns, costly lawsuits, and about his fears for Lucas and Mom. Elena has never faced real hardship, he said, his voice weakening as fatigue set in. And Lucas. He's a good kid, but he's been sheltered. As a nurse came in to check his vitals, signaling the end of visiting hours, Robert caught my hand in a surprisingly strong grip. I have no right to ask anything of you, Olivia, but if you could keep an eye on them after I'm gone, not financially, just, they're going to be lost. I nodded, making no promises but acknowledging his concern. As I turned to leave, he called my name one last time. The blue box in my home office, top shelf of the bookcase. There's something in there you should see. I returned to the mansion with Robert's cryptic message echoing in my mind. Mom was out at her weekly hair appointment, maintaining appearances even as their world collapsed. Lucas was at a friend's house, studying for finals that suddenly seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The home office, once Robert's sanctuary of leather-bound books and expensive fountain pens, was now half empty, with bare spots on the walls where artwork had been sold off. I found the blue box easily enough, a weathered fishing tackle box that seemed out of place among Robert's remaining possessions. Inside, nestled among fishing lures and old photographs, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. The handwriting wasn't Robert's, it was my father's. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the pages within. The letter was dated just weeks before his death, as if he'd somehow sensed the coming storm. "My dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're old enough to understand what I couldn't tell you in life." The words that followed shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Dad had been investigating illegal fishing operations vessels, harvesting protected species, laundering their catches through legitimate businesses. He'd gathered evidence, prepared to testify. "I've entrusted this information to Robert," the letter continued. "We've had our differences, but he's agreed to follow through if anything happens to me. The trust fund I've established for you comes partly from reward money for information about these operations. If my suspicions are correct, my accident may not have been an accident at all." I sat heavily in Robert's desk chair, my world tilting on its axis. Dad's death, the fishing accident. I'd mourned for 24 years, might have been murder, and Robert had known all along. At the bottom of the tackle box, beneath the letter, was a waterproof flash drive. Whatever evidence Dad had collected would be their information that had been sitting, unused, for over 2 decades while the people responsible went free. The sound of the front door opening jarred me back to the present. Mom was home. I quickly replaced everything except the letter and flash drive, which I slipped into my pocket. That night, in the privacy of my hotel room, I'd made an excuse about needing space. Unable to spend another night under Mom's roof, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Photographs, logbooks, coordinates, bank statements. Dad had been thorough. Among the files was a list of names: boat captains, processing plant managers, distributors, and at the very top, the suspected mastermind of the operation, James Whitman, Robert's father. The pieces clicked into horrible place. Robert hadn't pursued the investigation after Dad's death because his own father was implicated. He'd hidden the evidence, possibly assisted in the cover-up. And then what? Married Mom out of guilt? To keep an eye on the loose ends? I was still reeling from these revelations when my phone rang. The hospital. Robert had taken a turn for the worse. Family was requested immediately. As I rushed back to the hospital, questions thundered through my mind. Was I family to Robert? Had I ever been? And what was I supposed to do with the explosive information now burning a hole in my pocket, information that could clear my father's name but destroy what was left of Lucas's world? By the time I reached Robert's room, I knew what I had to do, but the universe had other plans. I arrived just in time to hear the flat line of the heart monitor and see the doctors stepping back, time of death being recorded. Robert was gone, taking with him any chance of answers and leaving me with an impossible choice about what to do next. The funeral was small, a testament to how far the mighty had fallen. Robert's former business associates were conspicuously absent. The few who attended spoke in hushed tones about such a shame and market volatility, as if his financial ruin had been as inevitable as the cancer that killed him. Mom wore black Chanel, probably the last designer piece she'd kept from better days. Lucas stood beside her, tall and solemn in a suit he'd clearly outgrown. I positioned myself slightly apart, still processing the bombshell of my father's letter. As the minister spoke platitudes about a man he barely knew, I scanned the sparse crowd. Most were Mom's friends, offering supportive glances that didn't quite reach their eyes. But one face caught my attention, an elderly man with weathered skin and the watchful posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime at sea. Captain Mike Rodriguez. He'd been Dad's first mate, had taught me to tie sailor's knots when I was barely tall enough to reach the gunwale. The man who had survived the storm that claimed my father. After the service, as mourners pressed ham sandwiches and sympathy on Mom, I made my way to Captain Mike. He spotted me coming and nodded once, stepping away from the gathering. "Olivia," he greeted me, his voice as rough as I remembered. "You grew up good, kid." "You knew, didn't you?" I asked without preamble, about Dad's investigation. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with surprise, but with caution. "Who told you about that?" "Dad did. In a letter I just found, I studied his face. You were there that day, on the boat." "What really happened?" Captain Mike glanced around the funeral home before steering me toward the exit. Outside, in the parking lot, he lit a cigarette with gnarled fingers. "Your dad was a good man. Too good." He exhaled a stream of smoke. He found out some things about certain operations. Illegal fishing, money laundering, big operation, powerful people. He was going to blow the whistle. "And someone sabotaged the boat," I finished. He nodded grimly. "Faulty equipment that wasn't faulty the day before." I tried to tell the Coast Guard, but he shrugged. "No evidence." "And then your mom hooked up with Whitman's kids so fast, I figured maybe she was in on it." "She wasn't," I said with certainty. Mom had many flaws, but she had loved Dad. Her quick remarriage had been about survival, not conspiracy. "Whitman's kid knew, though," Captain Mike continued. "Had to. He took possession of your dad's papers after the accident. Said he was helping organize things for Elena. Never sat right with me. Robert's betrayal cut deep, despite our recent reconciliation. He'd hidden evidence, married Mom, raised me in his house, all while knowing his father might be responsible for my father's death. Was it guilt? Manipulation? Some twisted form of atonement? What will you do now?" Captain Mike asked, grinding his cigarette under his heel. It was the question I'd been grappling with since discovering the flash drive. Exposing the truth would bring justice for Dad, but would also destroy what remained of Lucas's world. His father would be posthumously implicated, his grandfather possibly imprisoned. Even at his advanced age, "I don't know," I admitted. "It was 24 years ago." "The statute of limitations. There's no statute on murder, kid." Captain Mike's voice was hard. "And those operations your dad was investigating? They're still running. Different names, same game. Your dad died trying to stop them." His words settled on me like a weight. This wasn't just about the past. If the same people were still operating, still decimating protected species for profit, then Dad's death had been in vain. "I need to think," I said finally. "I need to be sure." Captain Mike nodded, handing me a worn business card. "When you decide, call me. I've got my own files, been collecting them for years, waiting for the right time. Maybe that time is now." I returned to the funeral reception with new resolve. Mom and Lucas would be evicted from the mansion within weeks. They had nowhere to go, no resources, no plan. And I had a house, Dad's house, sitting empty except for the rental income I'd redirected to my own accounts after discovering Mom's deception. Later that evening, I invited them to my hotel room. Mom looked puzzled when I asked Lucas to join us, clearly expecting another private financial discussion. "I have a proposition," I began once we were settled. "The foreclosure is happening regardless." "You need somewhere to live." Mom leaned forward eagerly. "You'll help with the mortgage payments?" "Oh, Olivia, I knew." "No," I cut her off. "The mansion is lost. But I'm offering you both a place to stay until you get back on your feet." I took a deep breath. "In Dad's house? My house?" The shock on Mom's face would have been comical under different circumstances. "You want us to live in Daniel's old house?" she asked incredulously. "After everything?" "It's not charity," I clarified. "Lucas will have stable housing while he finishes high school. You'll have time to find employment, Mom, but there are conditions." I laid them out clearly. Mom would need to get a job, any job. Lucas would maintain his grades and contribute to household chores. And most importantly, they would help me renovate the house, which had been maintained only minimally by the property management company over the years. "Why are you doing this?" Mom asked suspiciously. "After how I treated you, the trust fund, the rental income." I considered telling her everything about Dad's letter, the investigation, Robert's complicity. But looking at Lucas's face, hopeful for the first time since I'd arrived, I couldn't do it. Not yet. "Because Dad would have wanted me to," I said simply. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Lucas agreed immediately. Mom took more convincing, her pride battling with practicality. But in the end, necessity won out. They would move into Dad's house, my house, within the week. What I didn't tell them was that the arrangement served my purposes too. Moving back to the coastal town would give me access to local resources, people who remembered Dad and the suspicious circumstances of his accident, Captain Mike and his files, the harbors and processing plants named in Dad's documents. While Mom and Lucas saw it as a fresh start, I recognized it for what it really was, a return to the scene of the crime. And this time, I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter who got hurt in the process. The blue clapboard house looked smaller than I remembered, its paint faded by salt air and neglect. The porch steps creaked under my weight as I unlocked the front door, breathing in the musty scent of a home long unoccupied. "It's quaint," Mom said behind me, her voice carefully neutral. Lucas bounded past us both, exploring rooms with the enthusiasm of someone discovering buried treasure. "Liv, is this your old bedroom?" he called from upstairs. "There are glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling." I smiled, despite myself. Dad had put those stars up when I was 6, carefully arranging them into actual constellations rather than random patterns. "The Little Dipper is directly above where your pillow goes," he'd explained, "so you can always navigate home." The weeks that followed were a strange adjustment period. Mom struggled with the mundane realities of job hunting, returning from interviews at local shops and restaurants with increasing desperation. Lucas enrolled in the public high school, initially shell-shocked by the difference from his private academy, but adapting with surprising resilience. And I began my investigation in earnest. Captain Mike introduced me to former fishermen who'd worked the same waters as Dad. I discreetly photographed the processing plants mentioned in Dad's files, noting which were still operational under new names. I combed through public records, tracking the ownership changes of fishing vessels flagged in the documents. All roads led back to Whitman Enterprises, now called Oceanic Partners, and James Whitman, Robert's father, who at 82 still served as chairman emeritus. 1 month into our new living arrangement, I returned home to find Mom sitting on the porch swing, a cigarette between her fingers, a habit I hadn't seen since childhood. "You found a job?" I asked, noticing the folded uniform beside her. She nodded, taking a long drag. "Waitressing at the Harbor Cafe. I start tomorrow." Her laugh was hollow. "I worked there in high school, you know. Before I met your father." Full circle. I sat beside her, the old swing groaning under our combined weight. "That's good, Mom." "Really? Is it?" She stared out at the darkening sky. "I'm 56 years old, Olivia. I've been a wife, a widow, a wife again, and now." "What? A server bringing fish platters to tourists?" "You're starting over," I said simply. "Most people have to do it at least once in their lives." She studied me with unexpected clarity. "You've been gone a lot lately. Not at work." "I called your office yesterday when the plumber needed authorization for the new water heater. They said you'd taken a leave of absence." I silently cursed myself for the oversight. "I'm using some accumulated vacation time." "To do what, exactly?" Rather than answer, I asked a question of my own. "Did you ever find it strange that Dad died right when he was about to report illegal fishing operations?" The cigarette halted halfway to her lips. "What are you talking about?" "Dad was investigating illegal fishing, endangered species, document falsification, the works. He had evidence. He was going to turn it in. Mom's face paled. That's not. Who told you this nonsense? It's not nonsense. I have his notes, his evidence. And you know who was behind it? James Whitman, Robert's father. The cigarette fell from her fingers onto the porch boards. She didn't move to pick it up. That's impossible. Robert would have told me, would he? If he knew his father was responsible for your husband's death? Mom stood abruptly, stomping out the forgotten cigarette. Stop it. Just stop. Daniel died in an accident. A storm came up suddenly. The Coast Guard confirmed it. The Coast Guard investigation was superficial at best. And there's more. Robert knew Mom. He had Dad's evidence all these years and did nothing with it. I don't believe you. But the tremor in her voice suggested otherwise. Dad's accident was 3 months after he told Robert what he'd discovered. 3 months during which Robert could have warned his father. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. No, that would mean I'm married, that I let him raise my daughter. Our home's front door opened, and Lucas appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder. Hey! What's for dinner? I'm starving. His smile faltered as he registered the tension. Everything okay? Mom composed herself with visible effort. Fine, sweetie. Just discussing some house repairs with your sister. Lucas looked skeptical but didn't press. Cool, I got an A on my marine ecology project. Mr. Patterson says I have a knack for it. That's fantastic, Lucas. I forced enthusiasm into my voice. We should celebrate. How about pizza? As he bounded back inside to order, Mom gripped my arm with surprising strength. Not a word to Lucas, she hissed. Do you understand me? Whatever you think you know. Whatever you're investigating, Lucas just lost his father. I won't let you destroy his memory, too. I pulled free of her grasp. The truth matters, Mom. Not always, she replied, a hardness in her eyes I'd never seen before. Sometimes the only thing that matters is protecting the people we love. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mom's words echoed in my head, challenging my certainty. Was I pursuing justice for Dad, or was I selfishly disturbing the fragile peace Lucas had found? Was exposing a decades-old crime worth destroying a grieving teenager's world? My phone buzzed with a text from Captain Mike. Found something. Meet tomorrow. Harbor, 6 a.m. I texted back my confirmation, knowing that whatever he discovered would push me further down this path. A path that might irreparably damage what remained of my fractured family. Dawn found me standing on the weathered dock where Dad had moored his boat. The rising sun painted the water copper and gold, fishing vessels heading out for the day's catch. Captain Mike's arrival interrupted my thoughts. He looked grim. One of the old-timers remembered something, he said without preamble. The day before your dad's accident, he saw someone tampering with Daniel's boat. Thought it was just maintenance until now. Did he recognize who it was? Not clearly, but he remembered a distinctive watch. Gold, with some kind of family crest on it. My breath caught. Like a signet? Captain Mike nodded. The Whitman family crest. All the men wear them, passed down through generations. James Whitman himself sabotaged Dad's boat. The brutality of it, not sending an underling, but doing the dirty work personally, made my stomach turn. Or Robert, Captain Mike said quietly. The possibility hit me like a physical blow. No, Robert wouldn't have. He was dating Mom by then. Maybe that was the point. Get close to the widow, make sure the evidence never surfaces. I shook my head, unwilling to believe it. Robert had the evidence all these years. If he was complicit in Dad's death, he would have destroyed it, not preserved it. Captain Mike shrugged. People are complicated, kid. Guilt makes them do strange things. I left the harbor with more questions than answers and a growing sense that I was nearing a point of no return. If I continued, I risked destroying Lucas's world. If I stopped, I betrayed Dad's memory and let the people responsible for his death continue their illegal operations unchecked. As I approached the blue clapboard house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, an expensive black sedan with tinted windows. Standing on my porch, deep in conversation with Mom, was an elderly man in an impeccably tailored suit. James Whitman had come calling. And from the look on Mom's face as she spotted me approaching, this wasn't a social visit. The pieces of my investigation were converging, faster than I'd anticipated, and right on my doorstep. Whatever happened next would change all our lives forever. There would be no going back, No more half-truths or comfortable illusions. Only the harsh reality of long-buried secrets finally exposed to the light. "Olivia!" Mom's voice was too bright, her smile too wide. "Look who's come to visit. You remember Robert's father, Mr. Whitman?" James Whitman turned slowly, leaning on an ebony cane that looked more like a status symbol than a mobility aid. At 82, he still carried himself with the authority of a man used to commanding rooms and lives. His eyes the same shade of gray as Robert's, as Lucas's assessed me coldly. "Miss Morgan, a pleasure to see you again after story 2. I never imagined that a single picture could completely change my life. But last Tuesday, that's precisely what took place. I was standing behind our company's director, Mr. Peterson. He shook my hand and we both smiled. Finally got that promotion, the caption said. Hard labor is rewarded. Professional achievement. I didn't give publishing it any thought. Just another social media career update. How foolish I was. My name is Audrey, and at the age of 25, I was able to go from entry-level manager to department head at Marshall & Associates, which was my first major break. The trip wasn't simple. 3 years of more coffee than I'd like to confess, innumerable presentations, and overtime. However, I accomplished it alone, and that meant the world to me. My phone buzzed as I was still writing about my promotion high. I immediately recognized the number even though it wasn't stored in my contacts. Mom. Silence for 7 years, and now, unexpectedly, I was getting her call. As I gazed at the screen, my fingers shook. Hi there. I didn't sound as little as I wanted to. Audrey, my dear, it was just how I recalled my mother's voice. When she wanted anything, she used that sickly sweet tone. I just noticed your article, as did your father. We're quite pleased with you. Feeling proud? It was a smack of a word. When I most needed that pride, where was it? I managed to say, thank you, while holding on to my desk for support. We ought to rejoice. How about spending this weekend with us? We can talk about hosting a suitable celebration for you. The entire family would be thrilled to witness your accomplishment. My younger sister, Sarah, and the entire family. The favored, the golden kid, the one incapable of wrongdoing. I'll give it some thought, I responded, my throat constricted. Do it, please. We have really missed you, darling. It's time to move forward from the past. Do you not think? Following our phone call, I sat looking at nothing at my desk. After 7 years of stillness, a social media post shattered it. I had vowed never to return when I left that house 7 years ago, creating a life without them for 7 years. My palm touched my wrist's medical alert bracelet, which alerted me to my peanut allergy, the same ailment that Sarah had used as fodder for her nasty jokes and that my parents had dismissed as a bother. My thoughts replayed what my grandma had said. Family is more than simply your biological relatives. It's also those who treat you like family. Over the past 7 years, she has been my true parent, encouraging me during my time in college and having faith in me when others had lost faith. The words were proud. I kept thinking about you. It's funny how such statements may seem so sincere from one person and so empty from another. The picture on my desk caught my attention. Grandma and I during my college commencement. That day, she was smiling with genuine pride, not the produced type. Suddenly, my parents appeared. Old scars had been torn open by the phone call for Mom, and now the past was flooding back. Despite being 3 years younger than me, Sarah was the focal point of our family's world from the day she was born. Sarah wore fancy clothes, but I bought more functional items from bargain places. While my academic accomplishments accumulated dust in drawers, my parents would use pricey cameras to record her every step. I can very clearly recall my 10th birthday. For months, I've been admiring the artworks and hoped to get them. Just a simple package with colored pencils and a sketchbook, nothing fancy. Since number 2 pencils are what you need for school anyhow, I went with a pack of these instead. For Sarah's 7th birthday that year, our parents set up a Disney princess fantasy in the garden, complete with a hired Cinderella. Simply put, Sarah is more creative. When family members questioned the discrepancy, Mom would say, she needs the right resources to hone her skills. During a family meal, my Aunt Jessica once told my dad, you have to understand. All children deserve to be loved equally. This is incorrect. Mom's dismissive wave is still visible to me. You don't have any kids, Jessica. You're not understanding. Simply said, our females are different. Sarah has a lot of promise. Not even the tangible items were the worst. It was the ongoing emotional abuse, similar to when I took first place in the state math contest. Instead, Mom remarked, "That's nice, dear," instead of congratulating him. However, did you see the painting by Sarah that was on exhibit in the school hallway? My grandma saw right through it. "Margaret, this isn't right," she would inform my mom. One youngster is being raised to feel entitled while the other is being made to feel unworthy. Please, Mom. My mom would roll her eyes in response. Sarah is talented. Audrey is doing well. Audrey is a typical person. We're simply being realistic about what they can do. Sarah rapidly figured out how to take advantage of her position. Knowing that our parents would accept her without inquiry, she would smash something and accuse me. She made me appear horrible by unintentionally spilling juice on my papers and then crying when I became angry. She even informed her friends that I was the dull sister and that they couldn't play with me. Sarah played a little part in a school play on the day I was admitted into the advanced mathematics program. Can you guess what event my folks were at? While other parents were beaming with delight at their kids, I sat by myself in the arithmetic classroom for the award presentation. My parents never even saw my certificate, which was signed by the principal and my instructor. "We are more needed by your sister." Dad used to say this every time I attempted to communicate how I felt. "She has genuine gifts to develop. You have greater independence." Being independent wasn't a good thing. They used it as an excuse for their carelessness. It was even visible to our family members. Conversations would stop at family get-togethers when Sarah would abruptly demand attention or purposefully leave me out of events. The grown-ups would look at each other awkwardly, but my parents were unaware or maybe deliberately blind. Life often throws you a curveball when you least expect it. When I was 12, mine arrived at my grandmother's house in the shape of a peanut butter sandwich. I had eaten peanut butter many times. In fact, it was among my favorite dishes. However, that day was unique. "Do you want a lunch, my love?" Grandma had inquired while preparing her well-known peanut butter and honey blend. As I watched her pour the smooth peanut butter over the toast, I nodded enthusiastically. 3 bites in, something didn't feel right. The tightness in my throat made it harder for me to breathe. With my hands gripping my throat, I recall dropping the sandwich. My remembrance of what transpired next is still hazy. My life was spared by Grandma's prompt thinking. As soon as she saw the symptoms of anaphylaxis, she dialed 911. In the ambulance, I recall her clutching my hand. She spoke steadily yet fearfully. "My dear, stay with me. Simply continue to breathe." An hour or so later, my parents showed up at the hospital, evidently irritated by having to quit work. As the doctor described severe peanut allergies and how they might arise quickly, even if you've never had difficulties before, Mom was tapping her foot anxiously. The physician stressed that she must always have an EpiPen on hand and that you must closely monitor the components in everything she consumes. Cross-contamination can also be harmful. Dad checked his watch and nodded absently. Mom was on her phone immediately, most likely contacting Sarah's dancing instructor to let her know that she would be late for pickup. The hospital was worse than the travel home. They held back from expressing their actual emotions until we were in the car. Mom said, "This is just perfect," as though we already had too much to handle. "The math tutoring comes first. Now, everything with you must be complicated, doesn't it?" Dad said. "Audrey." I tried to shrink as much as I could by pressing myself against the automobile door. Their remarks stung more than any physical pain, even though my throat still ached from the reaction. The ensuing years were a meticulous balancing act of carrying EpiPens and reading labels. Grandma taught me how to advocate for myself and made sure I got the appropriate medical alert wristbands. She even gave the school a call to ensure they were aware of how serious my condition was. Naturally, Sarah was constantly amused by my new medical condition. When I recoiled, she would laugh and pound peanut butter sandwiches in my face. "I apologize." With fake innocence, she would remark, "I didn't realize you were suddenly allergic to everything." She would make a big announcement during family get-togethers. "Everyone, use caution. If Audrey eats the wrong item, she might die," causing me to feel even more alienated. Her conduct was never reprimanded by my parents. If anything, my need for prudence appeared to irritate them. I discovered that I should never trust food, pack my own meals, and read all labels 3 times. I hadn't checked myself. Although it was draining, it became the usual for me. It should have been a triumphant occasion when I graduated from high school. Northwestern State University full scholarship. I had completed it all by myself, balancing part-time work and my ongoing attention to food sensitivities while retaining straight A's. With Sarah's music blasting through the walls from her bedroom, the acceptance letter felt like a reward for all the study nights I'd spent. I will always remember the family meal at which I made my college admission announcement. I tried to speak steadily as I said, I got into Northwestern, complete academic support. Mom hardly looked up from her dish as she replied, "That's nice, dear. The problem is," I said, holding my fork firmly, "I'll require housing assistance. Tuition is covered by the scholarship, but housing is not." I checked the prices, and no. Dad's answer was straightforward and quick. "You choose to submit an application to a different state's college. You made that choice. We're putting money aside for Sarah's schooling. In 2 years, she intends to enroll in Juilliard. And it's not inexpensive." I fought back tears as I gazed at my plate. From the other side of the table, Sarah grinned while slowly and purposefully swirling her noodles. "It's only the expense of housing, though." I gave it another go. "Everything else is covered by the scholarship." "Audrey," Mom's tone was abrasive, "we've already decided. You will be responsible for determining the housing issue if you choose to attend an out-of-state college." Grandma entered through the front door at that moment, carrying a modest present bag and a balloon with congratulations. As she absorbed the spectacle, her grin dimmed. "Sarah, my eyes are crimson." Smug look. "Faces were what our parents named us. What's happening?" Glancing around the table, she inquired. "Always ready to twist the knife." Sarah laughed. "Oh, Audrey was accepted to college, but because her parents cannot afford her accommodation, she would have to live on the streets. They are putting money aside for my schooling at Juilliard, rather." The ensuing hush was deafening. "Is this accurate?" Grandma spoke quietly yet firmly. She went on when no one responded. "Richard, how dare you, Margaret? You won't even provide housing assistance for your daughter, who has been awarded a full scholarship. Please, Mom." My mom let out a sigh. Sarah's schooling. Sarah's schooling." The voice of Grandma rose. "But what about Audrey's schooling? How about helping yourself and your kids?" She looked across to Sarah, who was still grinning contentedly. "You're turning into a spoilt, nasty kid. I'm embarrassed by your actions." Sarah broke out in tears as her face collapsed. Mom and Dad hurried to console her, which was her go-to strategy when things didn't go her way. Giving me and Grandma angry looks, Mom yelled, "This is exactly what we mean! You and Audrey!" "You're constantly making trouble, Mom, making things tough all the time." Without a word, something inside of me exploded. I got to my feet and left the dining room. I went upstairs to my bedroom, took out my old duffel bag, and began packing stuff inside. A few minutes later, Grandma was at the doorway. "Sweetheart, make sure you have everything you need. I'm taking you home with me. However, college," she responded firmly. I started. "We'll be taken care of. I'll cover your housing costs. You concentrate on your education and future planning." After 20 minutes, we left the home together, leaving behind Sarah's dramatic cries and my parents' irate words. I experienced an emotion for the first time in years. I hope. My time in college exceeded my expectations in every way. My small flat close to university turned to become my haven, where I could at last move freely without having to be cautious. Grandma came around a lot. She never missed a milestone in my life, a holiday, or a birthday. Sarah and my parents, however, turned into ghosts. On Christmas, no calls. I didn't get any cards for my birthday. At graduation, not even an SMS message. Complete quiet for 7 years. It felt unreal to be standing on their doorway following that phone call regarding my promotion. The home remained the same. Same well-kept grass, same cream-colored walls. I used to have to reach out to touch the same brass knocker. With a practiced, eager Audrey, Mom opened the door. She drew me into an unfamiliar, rigid embrace. The living room was just as I had recalled, with Sarah's accomplishments still taking center stage. Above the hearth, her Juilliard degree was displayed with pride. She hardly acknowledged my presence, other than to roll her eyes as she browsed through her phone while sitting in her father's old armchair. When my mother was overjoyed by my promotion, "You have our utmost admiration, dear." Mom's words sounded empty when she repeated them. After a 7-year hiatus. "Richard, aren't we?" Dad, who was sitting on the couch, nodded. "Extremely pleased." "We should celebrate properly," Mom said, her voice adopting the same familiar planning tone I recalled from all of Sarah's celebrations. "Making your way up in a big company like that. This is a large family get-together at home. It would be wonderful for everyone to see you and Jessica. Every one of your cousins. Grandmother as well." I posed a direct question. Naturally. Mom spoke rapidly, but I could see a faint frown on her face. "Audrey, we want to put things right. Too much time has passed. In 2 weeks, for example. Allow time for everyone to organize." Even though my instincts were screaming, I found myself nodding. This was incorrect. "Yes, it does sound pleasant." It was an odd 2 weeks before the celebration. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from my suddenly attentive relatives, but work kept me occupied with my new duties. Every day, Mom texted about getting ready for the celebration. After ignoring me for 7 years, Sarah abruptly added me as a friend on social media with the comment, "Time to move on from the past, sis." Grandma was thrilled that they were reunited. During our weekly supper, she informed me that this was everything she had ever desired, for my family to be whole once more. It was pleasant and bright on the day of the celebration. There were already automobiles lining the street when I arrived at my parents' house. As Jessica's daughter Emma ran around with her phone, capturing everything like a small documentary filmmaker, the home was alive with bustle. The air was heavy with the scent of caterers. I was surprised to see all that free. "Audrey," Grandma threw her arms around me. "You look stunning, my love." Jessica then gave me a hug. "I'm quite proud of you, child. Head of the department at your age." "That's amazing." In a fashionable outfit that most likely cost more than my rent each month, Sarah stood beside the stairs. She smiled her rehearsed pageant grin to greet guests. Our parents were the ideal hosts, acting as though the previous 7 years had never occurred. Mom clinked her glass to get attention after everyone had taken their seats at the ornately set dining table. "Having everyone here today makes us extremely pleased." With a big smile, she started. "We're celebrating Audrey's promotion, as you are aware." She took a moment for courteous applause. It's great to see her establishing herself in the business world at last. I should have realized that the word "finally" was a red flag. "And talking about achievement," Mom said, her voice getting happier. "Let me take a moment to discuss our Sarah. She graduated with honors from Juilliard last year. As many of you are aware, she is a really brilliant artist." After giving a thorough summary of Sarah's accomplishments for the following 5 minutes, Audrey concluded by saying, "Now that Audrey has this fantastic position and the air of management, we're hoping that she'll help her incredibly qualified sister join this prestigious company." There was silence at the table. I sensed that Grandma was watching me. You see, as well as Jessica's uneasy chair adjustment, Emma recorded every agonizing minute with her phone focused on the scene. "Actually," I responded in a very steady voice, "I am not in a position to make any hiring decisions. I'm not a director, I'm a department head. I don't decide who gets hired." Mom's grin grew strained. "However, with your newfound influence, of course." "I'm sorry," I interrupted, getting to my feet. "Can we speak quietly, Mom and Dad?" I led them into the kitchen. When we were alone, their trained grins vanished. This was meant to be a celebration of my promotion, I thought. "Not a networking event for Sarah," I replied gently. "Audrey, don't be self-centered." Mom lost her temper. "Sarah needs this chance. Family is helpful. Family. Selfish? Incredulous," I repeated. "After a 7-year hiatus, you only get in touch with me when you need something from me. And it's me who is self-centered." Dad's expression grew stern. "Sarah has every edge. Thanks to us. Put all of her money into her future. Helping your sister is the least you can do. You're in a position to accomplish it now." The tension followed us like a thundercloud as we made our way back to the dining room. I took a seat, attempting to block out Aunt Jessica's and Grandma's worried looks. While we were out, The main course had been served by the caterers. A sophisticated chicken entree with a rich sauce, maybe. With my head still spinning from the chat in the kitchen, I took a few nibbles. The sauce had a curious, almost nutty taste. I felt a constriction in my throat. When I recognized what was occurring, I felt a familiar terror. Peanuts! My hand was already fumbling for my purse, and the EpiPen inside when I managed to gasp. Peanuts are present. The room started to spin. Chair scraping sounds sounded alarming to me. The sound of Grandma's voice broke the commotion. "Call 911, please." After then, everything was a haze of noises and darkness. Grandma's hands clasping mine and the sensation of my throat shutting are the last things I recall. The persistent beep of hospital monitors startled me up. My body felt heavy, and my throat felt raw. Grandma was sitting next to my bed, her face etched with fatigue and anxiety. When she saw my eyes open, she muttered, "Oh, thank God, we nearly lost you, my love." It was one of the worst anaphylactic responses the doctor had ever seen. My throat so painful that I was unable to talk. Grandma squeezed my hand and murmured, "Don't try to talk yet. It's been hours since you left." The paramedics and the EpiPen hardly made it to you in time. Before Grandma could respond, I was able to spit out how the food they knew, and Jessica and Emma rushed into the room. Emma's youthful face seemed unusually stern as she gripped her phone. The voices of Audrey and Jessica trembled with rage. "Emma, there is something you must see." "Show her." Emma moved ahead. She held out her phone with shaking hands. She said, "I was filming everything at the party. I acquired this when you and your folks were in the kitchen. The dining area was filmed from a perspective close to the dessert table. I could picture me and my parents heading to the kitchen, then leaving as soon as everything was clear." Sarah got up, went to my apartment, and set up. She swiftly mixed something into my food after taking a little container out of her upscale purse. There was no mistaking the sneer on her face. "Peanut butter is that?" Jessica's voice was harsh as she said, "Despite being fully aware of your sensitivity, your sister purposefully added peanut butter to your dish." I saw the incident repeat itself as I gazed at the phone's screen. My own sister, Sarah, had made an effort. "You could have been slain by her," the voice of Grandma cracked. She was well aware of her actions. In shocked silence, the four of us repeatedly watched the damning proof, the nonchalant manner in which she had done it, and the faint smile on her face as she swirled the peanut butter into my meal. It was planned, purposeful, motivated by a mixture of anger and incredulity. I left the hospital against the advice of the doctors. Emma's phone video was heavy in my pocket. Before I departed, she would mail it to me. My palms trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled up to my parents' house. The living room was where they were all. As though I hadn't almost died at their dinner table hours before, Mom, Dad, and Sarah were all acting as like nothing had happened. "Why are you here?" Sarah hardly raised her head from her phone to inquire. "You ought to be in the hospital, right? Exaggerating." "I am aware of what you did." I spoke in a very composed tone. "I am aware that you add peanut butter to my meals." Sarah's face was a mask of indignation as her head snapped up. Mom got up with a start. "You have no right to blame your sister." She spat. "You've cast enough issues, right?" I took out my phone, opened the video, and hit the play button. There was silence in the room. Sarah was carefully mixing peanut butter into my breakfast, except for the damning proof that was visible on the screen. Sarah's expression lost its color as she smirked self-satisfiedly. Amazingly, she then burst out laughing. "Come on, it was only a joke." "You take things extremely seriously." "A joke?" I trembled as I spoke. "I may have perished. Do you get that?" "I barely made it, according to the doctor." "Oh, please." Mom dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "It's melodramatic of you." Sarah was only enjoying herself a little. "Have fun?" I gaped at them in shock. Anaphylactic shock struck me. My heart almost stopped. "Pay close attention." Dad's voice became icy. "You are no longer our daughter if you even consider calling the cops. We will totally disinherit you." Everything became quite evident in that instant. I was not related to these folks. They had never been. Without saying another word, I left, got into my car, and headed home. Now my hands were steady. I was fully aware of what I had to accomplish. I posted the video to my social media accounts while seated at my computer. I wrote beneath it, "I discovered the true meaning of family today." And it's not these individuals. Knowing that I had a serious allergy, my own sister purposefully poisoned me with peanuts. It was a joke, according to my parents. I will never again refer to them as family. It was an instantaneous and explosive reaction. I received shocked and indignant comments from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and Jessica posted the video along with her own biting remarks. Colleagues and friends showed support and horror. In the comments, Sarah and my parents retaliated, accusing me of being an attention seeker and saying it was all a mistake. However, the video was self-explanatory. I went to the police station the following morning and made an official report. My parents' attorney brought a legal document that afternoon. They were taking me out of their will and formally disowning me. Sarah shared a heartbreaking video of me using falsehoods to ruin the family. However, I wasn't alone myself. That night, Grandma gave me a call. She responded firmly. I've talked to my lawyer. I'm severing all contact with them. My only heir right now is you, Audrey. In any case, you have always been more of my daughter than Margaret's. That evening, I sat on my sofa and read the deluge of texts from friends, coworkers, and actual family members offering support. Emma sent me a text and my phone buzzed. Even now, you remain my favorite cousin. You are welcome to join us for supper at any time, Mom says. I had left a poisonous household 7 years prior. I was rushing toward a genuine one this time. Your intended family may not always be the one you were born into. You have to construct your own sometimes. Story 3, I'm Helen Anderson, and I grew up in what I considered to be the perfect American household. At first, we weren't wealthy, but we were content. My parents and I live alone in our small starter house. James Anderson, my father, was the most diligent man I had ever encountered. Beginning with just 2 vehicles, he started his transportation firm from the bottom up and eventually grew it into a prosperous enterprise. I recall that he insisted on doing the truck maintenance himself, and occasionally he would return home coated in grease. Early on, I can hardly bring myself to call her that anymore, but her name is Sarah Mom. Back then, he was a restaurant manager. Despite her continuous complaints, she was very competent at her work. She'd remark during supper, one day, James, food was pushed about her plate. Being a good housewife is what I aspire to. I'm dying of all these late nights. Dad would simply give her a pat on the hand and smile, telling her that she would soon be allowed to stop. And he fulfilled his pledge. When I was 9 years old, Dad's business thrived. After he secured a number of significant contracts, we found ourselves relocating to a stunning 2-story home in one of the town's most exclusive areas. I have a large, light-filled room of my own with windows overlooking our lawn. I went crazy with the decor, including the enormous bookcase, the fairy lights all over the place, and the light purple walls. Dad developed himself. He worked on it for a whole weekend, grumbling obscenities when he believed I couldn't hear him, but grinning proudly when it was eventually completed. Soon after we relocated, Mom quit her work. As she had always desired, she was rarely home, rather than taking care of the house as she had stated she wanted to. It was always a brief shopping excursion or lunch with the gals, or I had a late appointment at the salon. Dad seemed unconcerned, but his firm kept him too busy. He made time for me every time. Our day was always Sunday. He would listen to all of my stories about school and friends as we went for ice cream, as though these were the world's most significant items. It was just before my 11th birthday that we last had ice cream. Dad was telling me about one of his drivers phoning in ill on a sunny spring day. As he finished his cone, he remarked, I guess I'll have to do the run myself tomorrow, as in the past. May I accompany you? I inquired, looking forward to a road trip with my father. He ruffled my hair and laughed. Princess, not this time. It's only a little overnight excursion. I will return sooner rather than later. Before going to bed that night, I recall giving him a very strong hug. I adore you, Dad. I spoke without realizing that it would be my final time speaking to him. He departed before daylight the following morning. Mom was still asleep. Our nanny, Maria, prepared his coffee and packed his lunch. I heard him pull out of the driveway after starting his truck. I never saw my father alive again after that. At 3:47 a.m., the phone call came in. I know this because that weird feeling in my gut kept me awake and prevented me from falling asleep. I heard something crack and then heard Mom scream from her bedroom. Her bedroom lamp, most likely. My recollection and the following several hours are a fog. There are policemen in our living room. Mom paced back and forth, chatting on the phone, while Maria held me close. Words like fatal collision and immediate death. Around me like butterflies in the dark. A lorry that had jackknifed across the highway had collided with Dad's truck. As if that would make it better, they said he didn't suffer. However, nothing improved it in any way. There was nothing that could bring my father back. In my mind, the funeral is basically a blur. I recall looking at the closed coffin and not truly thinking my father was inside. Mom wailed and virtually threw herself across the coffin, putting on quite a show. Once. Now that I think about it, I see how dramatic everything was. But when I was 11, I believed that was the only way adults dealt with loss. I got to know Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia for the first time during the funeral. They appeared to be complete strangers. Uncle Robert, however, shared his father's eyes and their kind, wrinkled corners. As he attempted to use his tears to grin at me. "Hello, Helen," he whispered, lowering himself to my level. "I am the sibling of your father. I'm so sorry, this is the way we're meeting. How come we haven't met before?" I recall being as frank as a child can be. His face took on a shadow. "Me and your dad. A long time ago, we had a quarrel. Now, however, none of it matters. After the funeral, I had to come say goodbye to my younger brother. Mother's sorrow dissipated like morning. Dale. In a few weeks, she was meeting with her father's attorneys, taking over his firm, and feigning to be an expert in managing a transportation company. She began using words like modernization and restructuring, but it was clear that she was making them up as she went along. The majority of my time was spent with Maria, who would sadly shake her head whenever my mother returned home with shopping bags from pricey boutiques. One day, while preparing my lunch, Maria murmured, "Your mother is spending money like water. For weeks, the unfortunate drivers have not received their due compensation." She was correct. One by one, Dad's staff began chopping. These were those who had been employed by him for many years. Some from the start. I recalled their names, faces, and the small gifts they used to give me from their origins. Now, unable to provide for their families via assurances and justifications, they were departing. Mom sold the remnants of Dad's business 6 months after his death for a small portion of its original value. She pretended to have made a wise business choice, but everyone was aware of the reality. After Dad's business was sold, she would destroy all of his hard work. Mom was out and about much of the time, and I was with Maria most of the time. She had begun teaching me Spanish because she thought it would be useful in the future. After school, I spent a lot of time in the library. Compared to returning home to an empty house, it was better. Mom would occasionally smell like wine when she came in late at night, hardly seeing me. "You're still awake, I see." As if shocked to see me in my own house, she would reply. She would then go into her room, and if I saw her at all, it would be the following evening. Then that Sunday evening arrived. Mom came running in the door, laughing like a teenager, when I was in the kitchen completing my schoolwork. She wasn't by alone. "Helen, dear," she cried. Her voice was full of phony excitement. "Meet Richard." Richard was tall and dressed in a pricey suit that nevertheless managed to seem inexpensive. He gazed at me with a smile that stopped short of his eyes. "Helena," Mom whispered, holding Richard's arm tightly. "Last weekend, Richard and I tied the knot. Your new father is him. We will once again be a true family. I had a decent family already." My voice trembled as I spoke. "I have a father already." Richard's phony smile vanished. He spoke sternly. "Listen here, young lady. I am now married to your mother. You have to be respectful and accept that. You aren't my dad." I returned the spit. "My father will never be you." "Do you see what I mean?" Richard looked at his mother. A challenging child needs discipline. Moving in, however, was only the first step, Richard. His sister Janet, mother Gloria, and 12-year-old niece Madison all moved in within a week. Like an invading army, they took over the house, moving furniture and altering the decor that their parents had chosen. Mom seemed unconcerned. She quickly became close friends with Janet, chatting and shopping for hours. Before her mother dismissed her, Gloria took over the kitchen and grumbled about Maria's cuisine. In that house, I lost the one person who still cared about me. Then the last blow was delivered. One day, Madison was in my room when I got home from school. Dad had constructed my room. The bookcase in my room, which has fairy lights and purple walls. What are you doing? I insisted. I could have this room, Sarah remarked. Madison grinned. I need room for everything, and it's larger than the guest room. Leave now! I let out a yell. My room is this one. No more. She threw my books off the shelves in a tease. According to your mother, you will be relocating to the tiny room down the hallway. I went crazy. Madison and I both fell down in a tangle of arms and legs when I rushed at her. We both screamed as I tugged her hair and she clawed at my face. We were separated when Richard and Mom ran in. Helen, Mom let out a cry. You dare! Now get to your new room. No, my room is here. I got it from Dad. Richard took a firm hold of my arm. Dad is no longer with you, he grinned. Now this is my home. And you'll follow instructions. For 2 days, they kept me confined to the tiny guest room, only allowing me to go for potty and school breaks. In the corner were boxes containing my belongings and books. The rubbish was tossed through the wall, along with Dad's bookcase. I could hear my mother chatting with Janet downstairs as if nothing were wrong, and Madison playing music in my former room. A few weeks after the room incident, I heard noises coming from downstairs late at night as I was making my way to the restroom. I stayed in the shadows and slipped to the top of the steps. It gets harder every day with the girl. Richard was speaking. She is upsetting the peace in our household. Have you thought about finding her a new home? My heart stopped beating. Another house? Do you mean adoption? Mom inquired, and her thoughtfulness made my blood run cold. That may work, I guess. She's not too old yet. Everyone would benefit, Janet continued. After that incident, Madison is terrified of her. And to be honest, she no longer belongs here. They couldn't mean it. I convinced myself as I hurried back to my room and buried my face in my pillow. Mom refused to reveal who I was. She was unable to. Condensing myself, I put the topic to the back of my thoughts. It was only conversation. My 13th birthday came 2 months later. I didn't have high expectations. Dad had passed away, so we hadn't celebrated my birthdays. However, I was taken aback when Uncle Robert and Patricia arrived at the door. Helen, happy birthday, Uncle Robert replied as he gave me a firm embrace. When Richard passed by without a glance at us, his eyes narrowed. Mom had prepared a hurried meal, perhaps feeling ashamed that her father's brother would criticize her. A knife could easily cut through the tension around the table. Mom cleared her throat after that. Well, Robert, I'm happy you're here, Patricia. I have to talk about something. I felt my gut tighten at something in her voice. Here, Helen is not content, Mom went on without glancing at me. We're not happy either, to be honest. Our new family dynamic does not accommodate her. I made the decision to adopt her. The word struck me like a punch to the body. I had overheard a discussion that was more than simply banter. Since you and Patricia don't have children of your own, Mom, she said in a casual tone that sounded like she was talking about the weather, perhaps you should take her? I'll start searching for other families if not. The room whirled. It was my birthday and I was out of breath. On my birthday, she was giving me away. So aggressively did Uncle Robert's chair scrape back that it toppled over. We'll have her. His face was crimson with rage as he thundered. And I've never seen a more reprehensible excuse for a mother than you, Sarah. You dare! Richard began to get up, but Uncle Robert's glance caused him to recline in his chair. Patricia, Uncle Robert said in a softer tone, assist Helen with packing. We're heading out immediately. Patricia took me upstairs after putting an arm around my trembling shoulders. We hurriedly packed, putting my clothing and a few other things in bags. I could hardly see because I was weeping so much. It will be well, my love, Patricia continued to murmur. We have you now. I left the home without turning to see my mother. She made no attempt to stop me, made no attempt to bid farewell. Uncle Robert shutting the vehicle door was the last sound I heard. Madison asked to use my new room until the first transfer was smooth. At Uncle Robert's house and in my new room, I would wake up temporarily unsure of my location. However, I would smell Ed Patricia's bacon and coffee coming from the kitchen, and keep in mind that I was at home, my actual house. The adoption procedure proceeded swiftly. Although it was painful at the time, Mom's unreserved signing of her rights later seemed like a godsend. On paper, Uncle Robert and Patricia became parents, formalizing what I already knew to be real. During breakfast one morning, Uncle Robert informed Helen that we had enrolled her in Riverside Prep. We believe you will enjoy this school, which is better than your previous one. There. Yes, I enjoyed it there. Without my former home life's continual stress, my academic performance improved. Both my new parents and my instructors noticed. They showed up for everything. Every parent-teacher meeting, academic award ceremony, and school play. They were smiling with pride as they watched every argument after I joined the group. Even after I was defeated, I was inspired to attempt new things by them. Lessons on the piano, scientific camps in the summer, working as a volunteer at the neighborhood animal shelter. They were in favor of everything, not only with cash, but also with sincere commitment and enthusiasm. The warmth of knowing that I was genuinely loved eventually took the place of the hurt caused by my mother's rejection. I stopped wondering if she ever gave me any consideration, and I stopped thinking about her. It was too full in my new existence. Those old hearts don't matter anymore because they're too joyful. When it came time for high school graduation, I had the audience's loudest cheerleader. Their entire extended family, including Uncle Robert and Patricia, had welcomed me as one of their own. "We want to share something with you. At my graduation meal," Patricia said, "since the day you moved in with us, we have been saving for your college fund." They saved enough to cover my tuition at any institution of my choosing. I decided to major in investment management at State University's business school. College was amazing. Determining to make them proud, I immersed myself into my studies. Patricia casually revealed that she had met my birth mother at the grocery store when I was a junior intern at Goldman Sachs. Patricia mentioned that she now had a son while closely observing my response. "Richard's family is still living at your father's former home?" I simply nodded, astonished to have only a slight sense of interest. Now that someone else was living that life, it felt like a faraway dream. I got a job at Morgan Stanley when I graduated. My eyes popped when I saw my first salary. I never thought I'd make so much money straight out of college. I went directly to the jewelry store the day I received my first paycheck. Patricia had been admiring a specific pearl necklace in a nearby storefront display, and Uncle Robert had been wearing the same old tattered watch for years. Uncle Robert's hands trembled as he put on his new watch, and Patricia began to weep when I gave them their presents. Weakly, he pleaded, "You shouldn't have spent your money on us. To whom else would I give it?" I hugged them both as I asked, "My parents are you. All of this is possible because of you." After graduating from college, I quickly rose through Morgan Stanley's ranks, gaining promotion after promotion until I was leading my own team. Sharing every accomplishment with my parents, whom I now referred to as Uncle Robert and Patricia, made it even more delightful. Without hesitation, the first apartment was a lovely condo with 2 bedrooms in a pleasant area of the city. Dad insisted on reviewing all the documents before I signed the mortgage, and Mom assisted me with decorating it. Then I got to know Michael. After a year of courtship, he asked her to marry him on a beach weekend. Before he had completed the inquiry, I replied in the affirmative. When we informed them, Mom sobbed, and Dad embraced Michael like a bear. His voice was rough with emotion as he continued, "Welcome to the family, son." Planning the wedding was our first priority. While Dad and Michael bonded over vendor contracts and budget spreadsheets, Mom and I spent weekends exploring locations and tasting cakes. Then the Facebook message showed up. "Helen, I've heard that you're getting married soon, sweetie. Even if a lot of time has passed, I am still your mother. I want to put things right since I've changed. Permit me to share in your wonderful day, please. I really do miss you." As I read the message, my hands began to shake. I contacted my mother right away. Yesterday, I saw Sarah. When I informed Mom about the message at the grocery store, she murmured softly, "About you, she didn't inquire. Not only once, but when I brought up your achievement, the manner of your marriage, okay?" I didn't like the way her eyes lighted up. Mom paused, then went on. "There's more. Madison, her husband's niece. After becoming pregnant and marrying a jerk, she and her husband returned to the house. Everyone in the family is arguing all the time. In the middle of the store, Sarah was loudly moaning about her financial difficulties. She reached out because I had a chilly knot in my gut. She is in need of money. I took a good look at the message before answering. Memories came back into the room as my fingers lingered over the keyboard. She revealed the birth date. I was thrown away by her. The years of quiet, during which she had several chances to get in touch but chose not to. I typed at last. Sarah, I want to be clear. My mother is not you. When you handed me away on my 13th birthday, you forfeited that privilege. My parents adore me without conditions. Something you were never able to do. You are not welcome to my wedding. You are not welcome in my life. Never get in touch with me again. I pushed send and blocked her right away. Now my hands were steady, my thoughts are clear. In some way, I felt lighter, as though I had finally dropped a burden I was unaware I was carrying. My wedding day came with a clear and lovely dawn. For the wedding, Michael's parents had booked the Mason Creek estate, a stunning historic site including a renovated Victorian home and expansive gardens. I was finishing up my makeup in the bridal room with my mother when someone knocked on the door. One of the security officers, Miss Anderson, was uneasy. I apologize for bothering you, but there is a problem at the front gate. Some folks are adamant that they know you. A guy, a lady, and a son in his teens. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew precisely who it was somehow. I'll take care of this, I remarked, gingerly getting to my feet in my bridal gown. You don't have to, Helen. I shook my head, but Mom started. Indeed, I do, for sure. My bridal shoes clicked on the cobblestone walkway as I made my way to the front gates. And there they were, Richard, Sarah, and a youngster who looked precisely like Madison, but must have been my half-brother, Helen. When Sarah saw me snatching the iron bars of the gate, she shouted, "Would you dare not ask your own mother to attend your wedding? Let us in now." I paused to give her a serious look. She wasn't very old. Her high-end clothing was clearly from the previous season. Too much makeup on her? She really needs to touch up her hair. Richard's costly outfit was swapped out for something off the rack, and he appeared thinner and more haggard. "You should be escorted down the aisle by Richard," Sarah said in a high-pitched voice. "He is your dad." I laughed at it. A loud, sincere laugh reverberated over the courtyard. The man who kept me confined to a room for 2 days was my father, the guy who assisted you in discarding your own daughter. "We are related," Sarah's voice broke. "You cannot just act as though we don't exist. Take a look at how you are enjoying this elegant wedding, your nice clothing, and your important job. We are struggling to make ends meet in the meanwhile. Our debt is engulfing us, and you're acting like a princess here. It was there, the true cause of this striking look." I responded icily, "I'm not playing at anything. Everything the first own is the result of hard effort. You aren't my family, let's be clear. Years ago, you forfeited that privilege. That residence contains my parents. They are the ones that brought me up, helped me out, and showed me their unwavering affection. You require our assistance." Sarah's lips was nearly frothing. "Right now." "You did everything for me after we did everything for you," I interrupted her. "Do you mean to discard me like trash? Removing my childhood, my house, and my room. You took care of me in that way." I looked at the security personnel. "These individuals are intruding strangers. Kindly get them off the premises. Here, they are not welcome. This is impossible." As the guards advanced, Sarah let out a scream. "I'm your mom, right?" "No," I spoke aggressively. "The lady who gave birth to me is you. There is a distinction." I moved away, ignoring her cries as they persisted. I held my head high. I went back inside the bridal suite. Mom was looking apprehensive as she waited. "Are you all okay, my love?" I grinned and inhaled deeply. "What do you know? Never have I felt better. I finally closed that chapter of my life." Dad stuck his head in the door when there was a knock. "Princess, are you ready?" I adjusted my veil as I took one more glance in the mirror. The woman facing me wasn't particularly frightened. No longer a 13-year-old girl. I was successful, powerful, and adored. Genuinely cherished. "I'm prepared." Taking Dad's arm, I said. As we got closer to the garden ceremony, the wedding march started to play. Michael was standing at the altar, grinning and crying as he looked at me. As Dad escorted me down the aisle, our guests turned to watch. It should have been this way. I was given away by the guy who taught me how to drive, who assisted me with my college applications, and who demonstrated the true meaning of a father's love. The ceremony was flawless. Amidst flowers and a clear blue sky, Michael and I exchanged vows, and those that genuinely cared for us. Our guest cheered as he kissed me for the first time, as my husband. Long into the evening, the reception continued. Everyone started sobbing after Dad's heartfelt statement, then used humiliating memories from my undergraduate days to make everyone laugh. I couldn't stop smiling as I danced with my dad while Mom danced with Michael. 6 months have passed since then. I recently returned from a Greek honeymoon with Michael. Additionally, a great new normal has been established in life. When people inquire about my biological parents, I honestly respond that they are the ones who choose me, loved me, and helped to mold me into the person I am today. To be honest, I don't care what happened to Sarah and her family after the wedding. They had to sell Dad's old house, I heard via the grapevine. But I'm not worried about that anymore. I've moved on from that phase of my life. Being deceived or abandoned is not the subject of my narrative. Finding your true family, those who love you voluntarily rather than out of obligation, is the goal. It's about choosing joy over resentment, forgiving others over being angry, and focusing on the future rather than the past. Now that I'm Helen Anderson Mitchell, I'm overjoyed with how everything worked out. I wake up next to a man who genuinely loves me every morning, and the parents who picked me and never let me leave join us for supper every Sunday.